Good morning, Internet. We are live. It is March 26th, 2019, and thank you so much for being here with me. Please let me know if there's any audio problems. I hope you caught my interview with Laura yesterday. My first interview with a homeschooler, I should say. She was homeschooled as both a child and has dabbled in homeschooling as a parent, so her experience is undoubtedly valuable to any parent out there looking for a role model or an example of how homeschooling works and what it looks like when a parent takes full control of their child's education. But earlier in the day, before I did my interview with Laura, which was very exciting, I did a talent stack breakdown of Owen Benjamin. Now, for those of you not familiar with my theory on talent stacks, it basically goes like this. Every successful person you look at, whether they're uber successful or whether they're a person who owns a local plumbing business, has what I call a talent stack. So if you take the time as a parent to observe the different talent stacks that successful people have, you can then make sure as a parent that you educate your child. Don't let the school system do it. You educate your child to make sure that they have a certain talent stack, a certain combination of skills that allows them to be an independent and strong person. And it's the people who are most ostracized by big institutions, by the mainstream media, by social media companies, that are the best examples of the power of talent stacks. Because these people, in spite of major institutions putting all of their weight against them, attempting to prevent them from speaking in the public sphere, are still able to speak their minds, controversial as it may be, in the public sphere. And if you have a talent stack that is so strong, makes you so capable, that the mainstream media, that Facebook, that YouTube, the big Silicon Valley tech companies can't shut you down, well, that might be a talent stack that as a parent, you want to understand so that you can assist your child in growing up and having something similar. Because as parents, what we really want is to have children that are strong, independent, capable of taking care of themselves, speaking their mind, and not ever having to rely on anyone else. So if you watched the stream yesterday, I broke down the talent stack as Owen Benjamin, and he was a great example. For those of you not familiar with his story, he was a very successful Hollywood stand-up comedian. He wound up as a regular, one of the lead characters on Mumford & Sons, the television show. He wound up in, I believe, 5 movies, including a prime role in The House Bunny. And I went over the talents that allowed him to do that. You know, he's tall, he's intelligent, he's a funny guy, good at public speaking, a master of rhetoric. His father was actually a college professor who taught rhetoric. And all of the skills that Owen had. But then he was blackballed from Hollywood, and he was all right because he also had financial literacy in his talent stack. He had read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, so when he made money, he invested it in income properties. So even though Hollywood stopped paying him, he still had income coming in from the rental properties that he owned. His brother owned a tree business where they cut down trees, an arborist. So Owen was able to go work with his brother, and if he wanted to, because he had done this over the years, he would be able to quickly go cut down trees for a living. So even as a big, powerful institution like Hollywood blackballs him, he has a talent stack in which would allow him to comfortably make a living and take care of his family, which for most of us, that's all we want in this life. But his talent stack continued to play dividends, and he was noticed by conservative YouTubers, started doing interviews, and before you know it, he had his own giant social media company. Owen Benjamin Incorporated has 240,000 followers, and he has good marketing skills. He uses his piano skills to make songs like How They Rule You that go viral. And he's continued to build on his talent stacks. Now he's able to build fences. He's has a bunch of land, and he's a farmer. So even if he's completely removed from the internet, completely removed from the banking system, he still has a talent stack that makes it where he doesn't have to work for anyone else. He can always be his own boss, which means he can always be independent, work when he wants, work on what he wants, and do his own thing, which to me as a parent, that's what I want for my child growing up. Of course, with morality, I want them to be moral, but in terms of a skill set, I want them to not have to rely on anyone else. So that's why the theory of talent stacks is so powerful, and using people like Owen Benjamin and Vox Day to demonstrate the independence that they can give a person in spite of major corporations, institutions, even the government coming down on you, is a very powerful thing. What types of talents would you teach your child to make sure that they don't ever have to rely on anyone else? Let's talk about Vox Day. What's his talent stack? In the year 2000, Vox Day started, for those of you who are not familiar with him, he's a very controversial figure. He's known as the Dark Lord. I'm not as familiar with him as Owen, but his talent stack is very impressive, and he too, in spite of major institutions attempting to bring him down, has been able to stay afloat and flourish. So there's value in understanding the talent stack and how it has empowered him to be independent, in control of his own life. So he broke in, he was a writer at WorldNet Daily, and he was successful as a writer because he had gone to college and he majored in history and economics. That comes through in his writing. But of course, there's much more that goes into being a writer that's widely reached than just knowing history and economics. But if you listen to Vox Day talk, he says that his inspiration is Aristotle. Now, the channel I've launched, Classical Learner, which I'll post the link to here because eventually this will become probably my primary channel. So please follow Classical Learner on YouTube and follow Classical Learner on Facebook. So Classical Learner, one of the things it alludes to is how they used to learn in ancient Greece, how they used to learn with Socrates and Plato and, of course, Aristotle. And if you track how the elites in ancient Greek used to be educated, they used to learn through something called the trivium of education. The trivium is what you have when you teach your child, when you make sure your child has a good talent stack. You have to make sure that they know the trivium of education. Because if you understand the trivium, you can teach yourself anything. And I think that is the root power and the skill set of Vox Day. So the trivium, inspired by Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. I actually did a stream. Let me just grab this. I had done a stream, I believe last week, on The Lost Tools of Learning, which Dorothy Sayers, it's a very short book, I recommend you read it if you have a child, talks about the lost tools of learning that the elites used to learn, and in many cases still do, that have been completely removed from the public education system. And you can see why so many people are completely lost as to what's happening in the public. In fact, later this week, I'm going to do an episode on sourcing and why it was so obvious to me from the start that the whole Russian collusion narrative was fictitious. By the way, I put out a tweet, TomFFRnews, which is just, I thought was hilarious. Jeff Zucker, the head of CNN, and Brian Stelter was using what Jeff Zucker said to defend CNN. And, basically what they said is that we're not investigators, we're just reporters to defend their pushing of the Russian collusion narrative when it didn't happen. So I tweeted out, this is what it looks like when you're so corrupt that you have to argue that you're incompetent. And CNN is so corrupt, and the mainstream media is so corrupt, that they now have to argue that, oh, they're not corrupt, we're just incompetent. That is hilarious. So anyway, that was a side note, but the trivium. So grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar, you have to know the structure of writing. You have to know how sentences can be produced and the many different ways in which sentences can be produced. You have to define your terms. If you were to join a debate club at Princeton or Harvard, the first thing they would teach you is at the onset of any debate, you have to define your terms. And a person who doesn't know this, that doesn't know the importance of defining terms, is very susceptible to being manipulated, because what a sophist would do is formulate an argument and use a word to have one meaning, and then twist that word to have a different meaning so that they can start to bend the argument and start to confuse the listener and make it sound like they're saying something clever. For example, we talked about CNN, right? Trump once gave a speech in which he talked about nationalism, which nationalism is what? It's just a person who believes that their nation should be put first, right? That the United States of America should be put in front of, for example, the United Nations or Europe. Not crazy. So what CNN did was they started talking about Trump in the context of nationalism, and then said that this was a dog whistle to that he wants America to be only a white nation, that he only wants white people to be in America. So what they did is they bent the definition of nationalism to also mean to actually mean white nationalism, which is something completely different. The idea that the country should only be white. It's not what Trump said, but that's how CNN bends the definition. And to people that don't understand the importance of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, they're very susceptible to being manipulated. So that's how that stuff works. Logic, simple enough. The practice of making sure that there are no contradictions within your own thinking process, right? It's intellectual self-defense, as I like to call it. So what you do is you have your child read something, and you have them formulate an argument using their grammar, put it on paper, and then after they formulate their argument, you go through it with them and you play the devil's advocate. And you start to go through the Socratic method to find out. You ask questions to find out if there are any contradictions within what they wrote. And if they wrote any contradictions, you point out your logic is faulty. How can you go back and reformulate your argument so that it's logically sound? Grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the practice of the ability to articulate your knowledge and pass it on to another person, something I'm engaging in right now. Of course, there's many forms of rhetoric, but that's it at its most simply defined, right? Grammar, logic, and rhetoric in the classical trivium. Can you convey what you know to another person? And after they write that paper and you've challenged them with the Socratic method and you've tested their logic, have them do a presentation to your family, to your extended family. And there's so many things you can do with this. You can have your child, especially when they're young and they're innocent to the world. You can have them put on plays. You can have them do all types of things that involve public speaking so that they can become masters in the art of using their grammar, using their logic, and mastering rhetoric so that they can convey their message. But Vox Day, his inspiration is Aristotle, so he knows, because he's a historian, he knows the trivium, and because of that, he understands grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and with that, you can teach yourself almost anything. Most people can't learn because when they go to learn something new, they come across words, they don't understand the definitions, and it sounds like Chinese. So you have to take your time, define the words, and you start to be able to learn better. So the trivium is the foundation of any good education. So after Vox Day worked as a writer, he moved on to be an editor. Um, Obviously, grammar skills, writing skills, that's self-explanatory. But he went from being a writer at WorldNet Daily to an editor, and later on we're going to see how that benefited him in life. He didn't stop there. He used his skill set, his talent stack, along with the connections that he made, and in the year 2000 he published his first book. To this point, he's published 14 books at present moment, and many of them have been very successful sellers. History, economics, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which helps with his writing and his editing. 14 books published. But he didn't stop there. Vox Day, he used the trivium and he paid attention to what was going on around him. And although his first few books were published by publishing agencies, Vox Day paid attention, and eventually he opened a publishing house, Castelia House. So now he's publishing books on his own, and he works as the lead editor for Castelia House. So now he publishes his own books, he writes his own books, publishes them through his publishing house, and he uses his editing skills. So he has writers submit works to him, he reads them, edits them, he publishes the books for these writers, and of course he gets a cut of the books that other people write. So now we have a talent stack: history, economics, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, writing, publishing. He also, with his publishing house, he made a series of comic books. So he's publishing books, he's publishing comic books. But how did he grow that publishing house? How did he get anyone to know about it? And how has he had so much success selling his books? Because it's one thing to write good books, it's another thing to be able to market them so that people see them and buy them. That's a whole other talent stack altogether. Coding. Vox Day knows how to code. Now, this is a very good skill to have, a very good talent stack. In fact, I have a family member who her son is very intelligent, very capable kid. He's very interested in video games. He dabbles in YouTubing, and he's young. He has nothing but time. I've said to her time and time again that you should really guide his interests. Parents, guide. Use your parents' interest, your child's interest, to show him that he can make his own video games, and get a teacher in there and start teaching him coding. And he will do this enthusiastically outside of the school system. What I've tried to tell her is that, you can't make people do things though, is that if he learns this one skill of coding, he'll never have to work for anyone in his life. And he will learn it because he's very interested in the video games. Just because your child's interested in video games, you don't have to let them spend their time just playing the games. You can guide them to build that skill so that they have real world life talent stacks that make them almost invincible. And the same thing with the YouTube. I told her she should start teaching him marketing, have him read books on marketing, sales. She could start to get him involved in something that outside of school that teaches video production, editing. All that are talent stacks that he can be building if she would just guide him in the process. And this is the power of talent stacks. I'm still hopeful that she will. But Vox Day knows coding. And because of this, Vox Day has actually been able to make at least 3, probably more video games on his own that have been very successful sellers. Hey Liz, how you doing? I am teaching values so early. But these are the things, these are the conversations that people aren't having in the public sphere. And these are the conversations that we need to have. So please tag parents in my videos. Please let them know that even if they're, I talk about some political things, they might say, oh my God, he's talking about the failures of CNN and some of the good things Donald Trump have done. Well, if you could put that all aside, you might see that there's a lot of value in what I'm talking about here. If you want to raise a strong child. Parents fear this. The whole thing I teach is not to teach your children what to think, but how to think. Well, a lot of parents fear that because if you teach your children how to think, especially from a young age, they might have a completely different worldview from you, right? A lot of parents are afraid of that, but that's what you want to do. You want to teach your children how to think. The trivium. So, Box Day knows coding, and because of that, he's made multiple very high-selling video games. He made them from his mind. Think about that, people. You want to talk about a skill that you can get a child motivated to learn. Your child's interested in video games, like every child. All right? You want to make your own video game? You can make anything in the world if you know how to code. You can literally create simulated universes. You can create matrices. You can create The Sims. Think about that. So Box Day is a successful video game coder. He actually started a video game company for a while and had success with that. But the coding, the good thing is once you know coding, no one can control you. You can be successful doing anything in this world. This is an elite talent stack skill. This is a skill that for the successful people I studied, so many of them know how to code. In fact, all of the young billionaires, not all of them, but most of the young billionaires under 30 years old, and there is a ton, they know this skill. You might want to write that down, parents. And it's not a hard skill to get your child motivated to learn. I'm going to go into why I don't allow, my child's only 13 months old, so I never turn the TV on for him. I never give him my phone. Eventually, he'll have a natural interest in those things, and I will allow him to do that because I'm not a tyrant and he's a person, but at a controlled level, not all day. We'll have conversations about why he shouldn't be doing that all the time, but I will use the natural interest that he develops in video games, and I will be kind enough to get him a teacher to teach him coding and get him the books and the materials and whatever the programs he needs, computer programs, so that he can learn coding. Because once you know that, there's power in that. What about educational games, Melis? That's a good question. Yeah, I'm a big fan of educational games. If you recall in my stream yesterday, I took out Cash Flow. They make a kid's version of this, which actually designed by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. He co-authored a book with Donald Trump, actually, and it's designed to teach financial literacy. The same can be done with video games when the time is right. I'm sure there's educational games that actually, in fact, I know there is. My other sister, I recommended it for, and she's actually getting it for her children, that teach coding. So there are educational games that teach exactly this. Like I said, it's just, you want to make sure your children aren't playing video games and watching television all day, but there's, like everything in life, there's a balance, and you have to let them do the things they want to do. I remember when I was in college, my friends made jokes about Catholic schoolgirls because they were so sheltered. Well, you get the jokes, but anyway. Vox is not a game designer, not a coder. These are not exactly sentiment. You might be right about that. I could be wrong, but the point is that whether he's a game designer or a coder who's employed coders, he has the skills to develop video games and use coders then to make the games for him. The value I'm talking about is in the coding skill itself. But you could be right about that. From what I read, I understood that he was a coder. But the coding allows you to do other things. So, for instance, he has a blog, 31 million views in the year 2017. If you know coding, or you have good coders work for you, you know search engine optimization. Basically, that is the skill of using coding to get your blog or your video games or your books to the top of search engines. This is a very valuable skill, something that people that know coding are able to do. This is high-level marketing without having to do the traditional marketing. If someone types something into Google and it appears in the first 10 pop-ups, there's a good chance you could sell your products. Mark Cuban has actually talked about this extensively on Shark Tank. He actually made a deal with someone who had nothing unique about their product, but as Mark Cuban said, I know this guy can get to the top of Google in the rankings. That's valuable enough for me to give him $200,000. So think about that. Vox Day has a patent on a 3D real estate product that he made. Again, you have to know how to design that or have the finances to hire someone that could design it for you. But he designed a 3D app for real estate agents, which assists them in selling products. He has a patent on War Mouse, which is a mouse that has like 18 different functions. And he was able to start InfoGalactic, again, whether he coded it or hired coders. InfoGalactic is a new social media company that Vox Day launched recently, which is competing with Twitter and Gag. He's had some success with it right off the bat, but think of the notion that he's able to build a social media company, a Twitter, a Gab type company, just from his mind because he has a talent stack. Coding is a very powerful talent. And then, of course, he was able to launch just this last week Unauthorized TV. Yesterday on my stream about Owen, I had mentioned that Owen Benjamin had $50,000 stolen from him by YouTube, right? People had donated $50,000. YouTube just said, we're not going to give it to you, and refunded some of the money. I guess the rest of it they probably pocketed. And then he lost the ability to have monthly subscriptions. But luckily, because he was friends with Vox Day, in the background, Vox Day had been making Unauthorized TV. And now, because of that, they could put their content on Unauthorized TV. They can get it to the top of the search engine, because search engine optimization. And because they understand the coding of it, they were able to set up a system where you could do monthly reoccurring donations. Very powerful skill. But with that, there's also business skills, right? Vox has incorporated. He knows how to do patents, or he's worked with enough attorneys to understand how the patent system works. He knows how to incorporate search engine optimization. He is able to use a form of marketing. And because of that, you put it all together, and he's been very successful. And in spite of being one of those people who are powerful institution, public enemy number one, he's been able to be very successful. Vox Day has music skills. He has written 3 songs and played in bands that have played 4 songs that, so 4 songs that achieved Billboard Top 40 club hits. Pretty impressive. He plays the keyboard, and some of the music that he's made has actually been featured in the video game Mortal Kombat. Finish him. So as you can see, this is a very well-rounded talent stack. He is a master of history and economics. He knows the trivium, which, I mean, that you can learn anything with the trivium. He's a good writer. He learned publishing skills. He knows coding, or at least he knows how to optimize coding. So he has business skills. He knows how to patent, how to incorporate. Why don't high school students who graduate high school know how to file for a patent? Why don't high school students who graduate high school know how to incorporate? Make sure that these are skills that not only your child knows how to do, make sure your child has done these things before they've reached the age of 18. There's no better learning than through experience, feedback-based learning. Have your child attempt to incorporate, speak with attorneys, see how they do it, file for incorporation, file for patents. That is what a good education looks like, because it develops a talent stack. Music, Mortal Kombat, and finally, some of the natural skills that Vox Day has. He's athletic. He was a championship soccer player in high school, I believe. He was All-American track athlete. He's intelligent. He was a certified group member of Mensa, which is people that have IQs over 130, I believe. You can't teach that stuff, but it's all part of a talent stack, and these might not be the skills that your child has, but your child will undoubtedly have some natural skills. So what you want to do is just build on the skills they have and make sure, like I said, your child likes video games, make sure they know how to code. And then, of course, fighting. Vox Day was a member of an MMA gym for a long period of time. He knows how to take care of himself, which I think is just an important skill for self-confidence. It's an important skill for self-confidence. You feel better as a parent that if your child gets bullied, they know how to defend themselves. The best part about people that know how to fight is bullies don't fight them. They never have to. If people know that you could beat them up, they don't want to fight you. So he knows how to fight, and even if he was kicked out of the banking system, if he was kicked off of the internet, he has enough experience fighting that he could use the assets that he had, and he could start an MMA gym, and he could teach kids MMA. So he has a very well-rounded talent stack of things that he can do that make it so that he never has to work for anyone else. So if you wanted to ask me any questions, now would be the time to do it. Please hit the like button. Please share this link. Please tag people with children in my channel because I'm trying to get as many parents as I can to teach them the lost tools of learning. And please follow my other channel, Classical Learner on YouTube, as well as Classical Learner on Facebook that I just posted in the comment section. The idea of a talent stack driven education is awesome. Yeah, thanks. I've really been trying to formulate a unique theory on how to properly educate a child. You know, my background, my bachelor's degree was in history education. My master's degree is in early childhood education. But what the school system is doing is trash. So what I've been trying to do is formulate my theory on proper education. And so far what I have is what you want to do is use the classical trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, along with feedback-based learning to develop talent stacks so that your child has such a wide range of real-world skills that they don't ever have to work for anyone else. They can, of course, if they want to. In fact, part of developing that talent stack can be done by having your child work for certain companies. So like Robert Kiyosaki, for example, when he was like 22 years old, he got a job working for Xerox. He didn't do it because he wanted to work for Xerox. He planned to work there for something like 1 year. This was his plan. And the reason for that is he knew that Xerox had one of the most respected sales training programs in the country. So Kiyosaki got a job for Xerox when he was 22. Yeah, paraphrasing. Worked for them for about a year with the sole intention of just using their sales program to teach him proper sales methods. So he was trying to develop, he didn't word it this way, but he was trying to develop talent stack. I got to write Kiyosaki about that. All right. Your family said music is a waste of time. So your family is falling victim to the indoctrination by the education system. When you study classical education, this is the quadrivium. It's the trivium and the quadrivium of education. This is the root of where all education comes from. This is what the elites learn at Harvard and Princeton and Oxford. This is what Aristotle taught, Plato, Socrates. No offense to your family, but who would you rather listen to? Aristotle or your mother and father? And that goes the same for my mother and father. It's laughable. Music is a root form of creative thinking, of critical thinking, of form, of logic. There is a beauty to it. There is a form to it the same way there's a form in nature, right? The Fibonacci code. And for example, look at what I just told you about Owen Benjamin, right? Music is a waste of time. Part of the reason he was able to be such a successful stand-up comedian in Hollywood is his funniest acts incorporated him playing music. He could play Bach, by ear, right? His probably most successful stand-up piece is where he does an argument between a man and a woman, and when he's using the man's argument, he has all this happy music playing in his head, like do 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 do, and when he makes the woman's argument, there's a thunderstorm playing in her head, and with the music playing, it's hilarious. Owen Benjamin was able to make to market through virality, which he was able to get. For example, his song "How They Rule Ya" about Tommy Robinson. I mean, it's basically a national anthem now for right-leaning people in the UK. Millions of views, marketing through music, and there's so many other things you can do. Vox Day, right? These are my two examples of people I just used. Vox Day made 4 hit songs in a niche music market, and his music has been featured in Mortal Kombat. Well, he's probably getting royalties from that song right now. You want your child to have a foundation in creative thinking, right? The school system, what it does is it takes a bunch of triangles and squares, square pegs, and it jams them into a round hole. And it takes away their creativity and makes it so they just memorize information. And the only real skill they learn from the school system is some memorization. There's some value. You can learn writing skills. I would venture to guess Vox Day learned a lot of those writing skills from the education system. That's great. There is value in some of the education system. But what you want is your child to have critical thinking skills. What you want is your child to have creative skills. So you want them to be very good with the arts, because art and music will start to lead them down paths where they figure out what they're actually interested in. And then once they figure out what they're interested in, you can start to develop talent stacks around that interest. You can guide them. For example, I said the video games, right? The child likes video games, then you guide them into computer coding, right? So they start to like music and art. You start to guide them into what they're actually interested in, and you guide them to make creations and then file for incorporation and bring their creations to the open market, right? You can have your child make songs and bring them to the open market. You can have your child, you say, okay, you like to make music. Why don't you learn to code? We can use search engine optimization to get your music to the top of search engines, and you can offer a service where you actually make custom music for YouTube creators or something like that, and you could charge a monthly fee. There are so many skills that can be learned and used to develop talent stacks if you follow the natural creative instincts of your child. So you don't want to suppress your child's creative instincts. You want to let them flourish. So I want my child playing music. I want my child drawing pictures and making art and putting on plays, right? You have your child get the nieces and nephews together. Have your child, 7 years old, they love this shit. Their creative interest hasn't been taken away, right? So you say, all right, here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to put on a play. I want you to write the play. And you have them write the play, and you have them work together, collaborate as a team. And after they write the play, you can have them present it, and you can play the devil's advocate and see if there's any logical inconsistencies. You're teaching them grammar, right? You have them grade their own grammar. You go over their writing mistakes so they start to learn how to write. You use the Socratic method to go over their writing, see if there's any logical inconsistencies in their story. Now you're teaching them the art of putting a story together coherently. And then rhetoric, the art of putting that play together, and they can do it in front of the whole family, all of the aunts, all of the uncles, the grandparents, and have all your nieces and nephews put together this play. And then you have your child who's good at music in the scenes that they're not acting can actually write original music for the play. And then they can see the persuasive power of music. When they have an emotional scene in their play, they can make original emotional music on a piano. There's a piano right next to me, by the way. My 13-month-old every day walks over to the piano and starts playing it. And by the way, you want to talk about introducing them to music early? there are beats like it goes dun 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 dun. He actually has started to play beats that he likes and mix them in with other beats that he likes. He's 13 months old. So when they say arts and music, those are not what your child should be learning. That is exactly what your child should be learning. And you should be using those skills to develop real-world talent stacks. That is how you make confident, independent, strong adults. That is what the school system doesn't do. Yeah, your family said music is a waste of time. By music, I mean instruments. No, absolutely not. That's what your child should be learning. Your family's severely undereducated. Well, you know what? Sometimes that's not the worst, because the education system's an indoctrination system. Yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of the education system is actually a disadvantage. Now, that doesn't mean if you're uneducated, you know anything, but at least it gives you a blank slate where you could start to learn. Yeah, memorization, that's the worst part of, that's the worst part of the education system. We're going to learn about the American Revolution, and for 3 weeks you're going to study key terms, memorize them, and then we'll ask you some questions on a multiple choice test, and then you'll forget everything you learned later on. No, what you want to do is have your child do reading of primary documents of people involved in the American Revolution. You want to have them write papers based on the primary documents to formulate their own theories as to what was going on in the minds of the people actually involved in the American Revolution, including the key figures. Have them read the writings of George Washington, right? Have them read the writings of Ben Franklin. There's a lot of value in that. And have them write to formulate their own theories based on that writing. Question them. Use the Socratic method. Question, make sure there's no logical contradictions within their writing. And then have them engage in public speaking about their writing. And they'll actually learn the history. They will know history better than 99%, right? If the objective is for them to know things when they're 20, why are we having them memorize volume information when they're kids? They should be engaged in finite learning, right? Just take 3 months on the American Revolution. You don't need to do it in 3 weeks. Take 5 months. Take 6 months. Learn how to learn. And you'll actually learn the history, by the way. And then when they are 20, they'll know how to learn, which is the most important part. And, by the way, they'll have a much better root in historical education or whatever education it is you're doing, right? The children find science boring. Why is science boring? Have them do actual science experiments. Why is that a hard concept? Science is the most exciting shit ever. You can make volcanoes with your bare hands, put the right chemicals together, and the volcanoes shoot up in the air. Have you ever met a 7-year-old? Science is the funnest thing on planet Earth. And if you learn that way, they will want to learn, they will take control of their own education, and it's feedback-based learning. So it's not, I'm memorizing something, the teacher's telling me, and I'm answering a multiple choice question. It's, I tried these chemicals, and it didn't work. So now let me try this chemical. And when I built the volcano, I used this material, and it fell apart. So why don't I do an adjustment and use different material? Oh, wow, I'm learning how to build things, and not just build things, I'm learning how to think critically. I'm learning how to think critically so that I can use feedback learning and critical thinking to build anything else in the future. Well, yeah, that's the thing. You don't have to teach a 7-year-old quantum physics. What you have to teach a 7-year-old is the process of thinking. And then if they're interested in learning quantum physics, if they stay that interested in science, they will teach themselves quantum physics. Nikola Tesla, who did more to advance the understanding of electricity than anyone in the history of the world, Nikola Tesla taught himself. He taught himself about electricity. It's like, people are like, if we don't put children in a science class, they won't learn quantum physics. Do you know how bad Americans are at science? They're all forced to sit in science class every day for 12 years. If you make science interesting, if you teach the process of thinking, not what to think, then if a child has a natural interest towards science, they will start to take control of their own education. You'll believe it or not, the child will start to try to study quantum physics on their own. And if you teach the basics of science through feedback-based learning and your child doesn't want to learn quantum physics, then don't have them learn quantum physics because they're not going to use it. The glare, I could turn the light away, but you know what? Let me see. That better? That's better. So, anyway, I think this has been a good talk on education. This is the talk they're not having in the public sphere, and they won't have it because the unions are so powerful that they'll never allow any significant changes to happen to the education system. So you have to ask yourself as parents, what am I going to do to remedy that? By the way, I'm going to be doing as many interviews over the next year with homeschooling parents or anyone who, if you think you have an interesting story about education, please email me that story about your education. Primary experience I want. Classical, I'm going to send you this email. This is my email. ClassicalLearnerToday@gmail.com. Please email me your experience, especially if that has been being homeschooled, homeschooling, trade schools, anything like that. Your experience in the education system. I'm going to be compiling, especially with homeschoolers, as many interviews as I can over the next year because I want to empower people by exposing them to real world experience so that they know what the pros are, what the cons are, what are the pitfalls to look for, what strategies you can use as a parent if you decide to homeschool or if you decide to just take control of your child's education, even if they go to public school, what methods and strategies you can use that other people have tried and experienced to empower your child. So I did an interview yesterday with Laura. She's an incredible woman. She was homeschooled up until 10th grade. She's homeschooled her children on and off as a parent. So watch that interview. The audio was off. I think I know why now, but the audio was low, so you might need headphones to listen to it. But this is how we change the world from the grassroots level, people. This is how we empower people. So please follow my links. Email me if you have any interesting stories you'd like to come on and talk to me about. And if you did support what I was doing, you could support me, www.patreon.com/FFRnews. Always appreciated. And of course, I am currently writing my book on education and homeschooling. And my objective after I write my book, this might be a few years out, is to make a powerful documentary on people that have homeschooled, to put a public face to it and show that there are over 2 million people in the United States of America homeschooled right now. And if we just continue to get that number up, we will start to have a nation of people that are independent, that are free to speak their mind because public corporations, institutions can't threaten them financially, and people that are able to think for themselves. And it's populations of people that are able to think for themselves that literally prevent the country from going into wars. So think about that. So please follow Classical Learner. Please follow, that's on YouTube and Facebook. Support me on Patreon if that's something you want to do. And email me your stories to ClassicalLearnerToday. This has been a lot of fun. As always, power to the individual. Long live liberty. Who's the next talent stack? I don't know. I think I did enough talent stacks for this week, so I think I'm going to do something on sourcing related to Russia collusion, why people weren't able to see that the narrative was fictitious, because I know sourcing. I knew it was fictitious from the start because I kept looking back to the primary sources of where the stories were coming from, And I said, oh, okay, well, they're just making this up. It's obvious if you get back to the primary documents. So I'm going to have a talk on sourcing related to Russian collusion, because people need to understand sourcing so that they can start to teach it to their children. But the beautiful thing is, if you have your child start reading primary documents as their primary mode of learning, trust me, they'll know sourcing. They'll just get it. Because they'll read documents that aren't primary after reading a bunch of primary documents, and they'll be able to see why it's not valuable. They'll go, yeah, this is what people say. You know, secondary sources, they're like, oh, someone should do a remix to Taylor Swift song with the media, with like the whole Russian collusion. That would be great. You could go over all the lies from the Russian collusion story. This is the type of shit you can do for music. I'm going to write this to Owen Benjamin. Remix the song, every fictitious lie of the Russian collusion story, and just, but that's what people say. But that's what people say. Oh, I'm writing that down. That's fire. See, that's why, unfortunately, I wasn't taught to play music and sing when I was a kid, because my parents believed in the school system. No offense, my parents were the best parents ever. But I wish I could sing and play that song, because if I could, I would literally do the whole remix myself. And now think about the viral power of that, right? Because you make the remix to Taylor Swift song. That's what people say. And you put in every lie the media told about Russian collusion. And it's like, Russian collusion, but that's what people say. You know, meetings with the Russians. Ooh-hoo. All that type of shit. So you put that song out, it has the potential, might not, but it has the potential to go viral. You get 1 million views on a song, you get a lot of new followers. Speaking of new followers, like this link, share this. Please, if everyone can tag. Help me help you. Help me. I got to get the clip from Jerry Maguire. I might dress up as Jerry Maguire so it's parody and make like a clip to that of me as Jerry Maguire. Help me help you. Please tag parents in my videos. Let them know, even if their politics are different than mine, because they've been bumped in the head, that that there is tremendous value in following someone who is talking about the process of properly educating your children every day. I'm good at this shit. I know this shit. So anyway, I'm going to write that down. That's what... By the way, do you see the power of the creative mind, which I've only embraced in my adult life? I mean, that's what people say, Russian collusion. This is how you want your child to think all the time. And imagine if they knew how to play, right? You said, do you teach your child music? Imagine your child knew how to play the piano, and they know how to sing, because you don't discourage that, you encourage it. We're going to sing a lot as a family. My wife's pretty good at singing, but I'm going to have my child sing and play music and do that with my wife. And then when my child has unique ideas like that, like different than that, but similar, they can take a creation in their mind and bring it to the real world. And when they get ready, no pressure, but when they're ready, I say, hey, you want to make some money? If they have a good idea that I know they can make money with, I'll just say, hey, you want to make some money? You can if you want. Why don't you file for incorporation? File for incorporation, Dad? Oh, yeah, you can start your own business. But, Dad, I'm only 8 years old. Yeah, no doubt, you can do it. What do you think? They'll think they can if their parent their whole life is telling them they can? Everything you have been taught about the way we are educated is wrong. I'm telling you, it's wrong. You can make your child incredible. Do you know Ben Franklin was the editor of a statewide newspaper when he was 13 years old? He had no formal education. None. Think about that. Have you ever read George Washington's Rules for Civility? He wrote it when he was like, I don't know, like 15, I don't know exactly. Read George Washington's Rules for Civility, primary document. He made a code of morality on his own when he was a teenager. This is what people used to do without formal educations. That's what people say. Russia collusion. Russia collusion. Holy crap, I love this idea. I don't even want to give it to Owen. I want to do it myself, but I don't have the talent stack in terms of music that Owen has. I'll make sure my child does have the talent stack. So when he has an idea like that, he can bring it to fruition. That's what people say, Russia collusion. All right, so guys, please follow Classical Learner on YouTube, Classical Learner on Facebook. Email me your stories if you had a homeschool education, a trade school education, Classical Learner, or anything you think is just overly interesting. ClassicalLearnerToday at gmail.com. And again, if you want to support me, patreon.com, FFRnews. All right, guys, thank you. As always, power to the individual. Long live liberty.